Hello, I am Blaze and welcome back to Warframe. Today I'll be looking at our new Fairy Queen Warframe, Titania. I'm pretty sure her name is supposed to be pronounced Titania instead of Titania, but that's how it's pronounced in game, so that's what I'll use. Acquiring Titania can be done by completing the Silver Grove quest, which can be started by talking to the new local representative in one of the relays, and will have you going around and scanning new plants around the solar system in various locales and going back to the titular Silver Grove on Earth. Each stage of the quest will award one of her blueprint parts, and completing the quest will also award you her blueprints in total. From there, it's up to you to build her. Alternatively, you can buy her straight away in the market for 275 platinum, or as part of the Silver Grove bundle for 660 platinum. In either of those two cases, she will be pre-built and come with a bundled Warframe slot and pre-installed reactor. Her base statistics are fairly average: 100 base shields and health going up to 300 each at rank 30, 100 base energy going up to 150 at rank 30, a sprint speed modifier of 1.0, and 65 base armour, placing her among the various other Warframes that are fragile and centred around casting, as opposed to being frontline fighters. She also comes along with a V and a D polarity in her mod slots by default, and a V polarity in her aura slot. The aura slot polarity is okay for steel charge, as that will give you a lot of extra mod capacity to play around with at the start, but I generally recommend changing that to a dash polarity so you can make use of corrosive projection, energy siphon, or loot detector as is applicable to the situation. Her passive ability, which by the way is still not bloody shown anywhere in-game other than figuring it out for yourself. There really does need to be somewhere that actually lists this stuff in-game without having to go to the wiki or check the patch notes, is an enhanced bullet jump distance by 25% and being able to leave a moderately sized particle field in the wake of her bullet jumps that also confers the same bonus to your allies who begin their own bullet jumps in that field. Aside from that, I am almost certain she also has an enhanced roll distance or velocity, but I don't think that's mentioned anywhere, so don't quote me on that one. Her passive seems a little underwhelming, but ends up getting pretty ludicrous when you pair her passive with one of the bullet jump mods. They stack. Equipping a high-ranked bullet jump mod can let her get a whole lot of air, which is actually pretty awesome. Although I feel this ability is slightly redundant due to the fact that she can just fly. More on that point later. We have 3 other abilities to go over before we get to that destination, so without further ado, here we go. Her first ability is Spellbind, which is her first crowd control ability, and can be cast for 25 energy. At maximum rank, this will affect enemies within 5 meters of the targeted cast location for 16 seconds, and can be cast from up to 50 meters away, supporting Titania as being more suited to being longer range support. Enemies hit by this ability will drop their weapon where they were, and will be placed into a weightless state where they will float around helplessly. They maintain their momentum from their initial travel direction, and can also be knocked around by other attacks or actions afterwards, which is cool. But it does result in enemies getting thrown in unpredictable directions, which can kind of come back to bite you if a heavy enemy ends up floating off into a strange place and you end up losing track of them. Most enemies will need to run back to where they dropped their weapon before they can resume attacking though, so that does help, but the infested just use their claws, so be mindful of that. As far as I know, Spellbind also does not disable enemy auras, so a corrupted ancient or the like will continue to make surrounding units nearly impossible to kill until you deal with it first, for example. On balance, this is a pretty cool ability and is cheap crowd control, but due to making enemies float, it does become somewhat unpredictable, which is definitely a point against it. Spellbind's cast range and area of effect are affected by power range, and its effect or duration is affected by power duration. Tribute is Titania's second ability, and is a single target power that will knock an enemy over and cause it to spawn a glowing soul that will give one of 4 different buffs to Titania when she picks it up, denoted by the symbol above it, and remain in place for 15 seconds after creation. It can be cast on an enemy up to 25 meters away at max rank, and is dealt 500 damage, though at higher levels the damage component is pretty forgettable as usual. The struck enemy will also have its attack power lowered for 12 seconds, though exactly by how much is not clear. What is clear is what each of the different buffs do though, so let's dig in. The type of soul you get from an enemy is fixed depending on the enemy type. Each buff has a duration that starts from when you pick up the respective soul, with each soul adding a new stack on the buff up to a given maximum and refreshing the timer each time. Ranged enemies will drop a dust buff. Dust will reduce enemy accuracy in a 30 meter radius up to a maximum reduction of 50%. Dust's buff lasts for 120 seconds in total, and is perhaps the most important buff given Titania's otherwise fragile nature. Melee enemies will drop a Thorns buff, which will reflect damage taken back to the attacker within 40 meters, up to a maximum damage reflection of 25%. Interestingly, any allies within 35 meters of Titania will also benefit from Thorns damage reflection. Though, given enemy health and armor scaling, this buff will probably become fairly underwhelming at high levels. Heavy units will drop the Entangle buff, which will slow enemy movement and attack speed within 10 meters of Titania for 120 seconds, up to a maximum movement penalty of 25%. This one honestly doesn't convince me much. It might help against melee units, but most enemies will be attacking you from further away than 10 meters, and it will take multiple stacks to have any appreciable effect on any enemies that are that close, as it only starts at 5%. Finally, summoned and flying enemies, namely things like Hayaka, Drax, and Corpus Ospreys, will drop the Full Moon buff. Full Moon will increase the damage your own companions do for 90 seconds up to a maximum bonus of 75%. Teammates within 30 meters of you will also benefit from the Full Moon buff effect. This one's pretty cool since various sentinels can actually do a lot of damage fairly quickly. So if you happen to spot some summoned or flying enemies, grabbing Full Moon while you're at it might be worthwhile. So on balance, the buffs you'll likely want to go for at all will be Dust and maybe Full Moon. I found Thorns and Entangle's effects to be fairly weak overall, but your own mileage may vary. The damage upon cast will benefit from power strength, casting distance will benefit from power range, and enemy debuff duration is affected by power duration. However, how long the buff soul lingers is not affected by power duration, and the effects of the buffs themselves cannot be changed by your own mod loadout in any way. On one hand, this does mean you can't inadvertently ruin any of their effectiveness, but on the other hand, this means you can't do anything to improve any of them either. Titania's third ability is Lantern, which can be cast for 75 energy and is her other main crowd control ability. This one is also single target and will render one enemy weightless for 25 seconds, or until pressing the ability key again to manually deactivate it. The targeted enemy will be surrounded by a cloud of razor flies that will make the primary target invulnerable and will mesmerize enemies within 20 meters of its position, causing them to stop attacking the players and start moving towards the living beacon, when it works properly and as long as they remain in range at least. When they get within 2.5 meters of the beacon, they will receive 350 damage per second from the razor flies, and finally, after the ability ends, either by your own will or by its duration running out, the Lantern target will explode, dealing 2,500 damage to itself and all enemies within 8 meters. This ability is pretty cool on paper and has a lot of potential, but it also finds itself saddled with some really big problems. The main one being that it basically makes the Lantern target behave like a spellbound target, meaning it can be knocked any which way and end up uselessly floating up to the ceiling of a large room, or being given a high velocity and letting everything around it slip out of range of its mesmeric effects, shortly afterwards becoming completely useless. These situations can arise when the Lantern target is accidentally shot, meleeed, hit by other players' abilities, your abilities, anyone's sentinel, anyone's kubro, or simply because the enemy decides to take the direction you shoot it from as a vague suggestion rather than actually accurately imparting the correct directional momentum shift to it. Or just by an enemy walking into the Lantern if it's too low to the ground and making it bounce off in some random direction instead. I have almost never gotten this ability to work properly in an open environment, and in a closed environment it fills your screen with particle effects and blocks your shots if you don't have punch through, because the ability makes the Lantern target invincible. If Lantern could be changed a little bit by, say, making the target be attached to the general area with an energy tether, then Lantern would be much improved. But Lantern as it is now is just far too unreliable for my reckoning, which is a shame because it is both pretty wide area and offers a reasonable damage component for mid-level stuff. Oh well, damage per second and explosion damage are affected by power strength. Cast range, as well as the explosion, razorfly damage and attraction radii benefit from power range, and duration benefits from power duration. Finally, Titania's fourth ability, rounding out her moveset, is Razor Wing, with a casting cost of 25 energy and draining 5 energy per second. Upon using her Razor Wing ability, Titania will shrink in size a la Tiny Kong and transform into a modified Arcwing style gameplay mode, freely able to fly around. Her weapons will be replaced by the Dex Pixia for ranged attacks and the Dewata for melee attacks, the Dewata looking suspiciously like a keyblade. After initially transforming, she will also surround herself with 6 Razorfly drones, much like Itzel's own fighter escort ability, though they have no set duration and will instead persist until destroyed or the ability ends. Both the Dewata and Dex Pixia have 160 base damage according to the arsenal, while the Razorfly drones do 80 damage per hit. The drones themselves are more a distraction rather than your main mode of attack in Razorwing mode, but they do this job quite well, and most enemies will prioritize hitting the Razorfly drones before Titania herself. When they finally do shoot at Titania herself, she is given a 50% evasion bonus due to her small size, which helps mitigate incoming damage quite significantly. For the real big guns, in a manner of speaking anyway, the Dex Pixia can take on the effects of either rifle or shotgun mods, and the Dewata will take your equipped melee mods. For the Dex Pixia alone, this offers a very interesting set of abilities depending on what your primary weapon is. The shotgun mod Tainted Shell will indeed tighten up the Dex Pixia's bullet spread, meaning running Titania with a shotgun can let her target enemies reliably from further away in Razorwing mode, while a rifle, especially with heavy caliber equipped, will mean the Dex Pixia are better suited for mid-range. This also applies due to the fire rate reduction on Tainted Shell, though paired with shotgun spaz it isn't too bad. However, it seems the Dex Pixia is not affected by Acolyte mods, which is strange because the Dewata absolutely is, with body count letting the combo counter persist for much longer as an example. Neither of them will benefit from weapon augment mods such as those from Syndicates or Executioners, and the Dex Pixia will also not benefit from specific subclass mods like Thunderbolt or Firestorm. As for the Razorwing weapon stats themselves, numbers graciously revealed to us by Void Glitch because again the game doesn't actually tell us this for some ungodly reason. I will provide a link to them right about here, but suffice it to say that the arsenal screen is a dirty liar, again. Dex Pixia is very much a status weapon with a 25% status chance per shot, and a heavy majority of 68 slash damage with 8.5 impact and puncture damage on the side, for a base damage per shot of 85. The Dewata is more a generic Arcwing melee style weapon with no standout supplemental stats, but it has a base damage of 350 which certainly helps, split between 52.5 impact, 262.5 puncture, and 35 slash damage. The Dewata does work with mods like Berserker, but given its 5% critical chance you're better off pairing Titania with a non-crit melee weapon if you want to use Razorwing a lot. For a more general idea of how Razorwing handles, it has been much improved in the week after her introduction. Its movement speed is greatly increased, the camera doesn't have headache-inducing levels of shake when using the Dex Pixia anymore, her ability to navigate around has been improved thanks to tightening up the collision boundaries, and I must say she's basically an AC-130 gunship when you get Razorwing going. She can fly up high above the enemies and rain down destructive air support for your team, quite literally tearing enemies apart due to the high slash damage and status chance of the Dex Pixia. But wait, there's more. Razorwing has had plenty of testing potential, however, it seems that agility drift does not work with Razorwing, even though one would think it should, and Headshot has told me that it doesn't work with Aviator either. This came with some measure of disappointment, considering I at first thought it had done something and got excited. But upon reviewing the footage, nope. You sustain the same damage in Razorwing form both with and without agility drift, which is a bit silly. Anyway, Razorwing's energy drain over time is affected by both efficiency and duration mods, highly recommended as the default energy drain is pretty rapid, and Razorfly drone and weapon damage is affected by power strength. All in all, the Razorwing ability is the main standout in Titania's arsenal, with Spellbind being somewhat useful but problematic crowd control, a few useful buffs from Tribute, and Lantern makes me wistfully consider what might have been as the targeted enemy uselessly gets thrown into a corner of the map tile. When modding her, I think you can largely either choose for maximum range or the effects of Spellbind and Lantern, both of which can still be cast in Razorwing mode, or going with duration and power strength to blow up the entire world with your magical fairy gunship. My ranged build makes use of both stretch and overextended to throw her Spellbind radius to over 10 meters, and the Lantern attraction radius to about 43 meters. Plus the inclusion of Intensify to avoid hitting power strength too hard, so her Razorwing still remains able to do its job fairly well. I find Primed Flow to be useful to increase her energy pool so she can throw out her abilities a bunch. And I also include Firewalker, though you can choose any other mod, in the extra slot for the amazing jumps. On the other side of the coin, the build I use for Razorwing includes Transient Fortitude to give a nice boost to power strength without hitting efficiency like Blind Rage would, and Narrow-Minded to balance out the duration loss of Fleeting Expertise and Transient Fortitude. This greatly limits your other abilities due to the significant loss of power range, sadly, but the Razorwing itself doesn't care about power range at all. But going for more range instead is also an option. Titania has a bunch of pretty cool ideas, and I enjoy her visual design. Her default helmet has sort of a moth antenna thing going on, and she has her Razorwing attached to her back the whole time, which does seem to add a fair bit to her fairy/moth aesthetic. Although the membranes on her Razorwing do sort of pulsate and warp around strangely, which can be a little off-putting, but maybe the slight otherness of her is exactly what they were going for. She has some pretty interesting colour customizations options as well, and I actually managed to stumble upon a brown colour scheme from the Daybreak palette that ended up looking pretty good by hitting the randomize button. Though I do find that some of the cosmetic chest pieces sit a bit too low down on her for my liking. And while I do really love her floaty noble stance, she transitions back to a normal walking stance when you move around. I feel like passing up the opportunity to have her noble animation actually make the Warframe float around instead of having to transition to a walk to move is a bit of a missed opportunity, but oh well. Regarding the gameplay, her Razorwing seems like pretty good fun to me. Her air support role definitely gives her a niche, so I imagine I will be revisiting her every now and then, and it lets you see the map tiles from completely new angles that you couldn't really before. Plus, swooping down low to the ground to pick up energy orbs feels quite nice as well, though you should watch out for shockwave stomp attacks. They will knock you off balance when you fly low. Same goes for Arson Eximus firewalls, though they also do obviously extend upwards by quite a bit. In any case, Titania seems quite good, though I prefer frames that can survive at close ranges when they need to personally. But I expect she'll be a nice choice for those of you who prefer to stick to longer ranges instead. Or even just for people who like the idea of flying around. Though, sadly, I really feel like Zephyr got left out in the cold on this one. I mean, really, she's a bird Warframe, why can't she fly? I mean, yeah, she's got the low gravity thing going on, but that's not really the same. Thank you for watching my look at Titania. All comments are appreciated, and I hope to see you around next time. For other Warframe content, you can give a click down below to check out my opinions on the Pox and Kavats, or just check out my quick video on Lisette decorations. And as always, good luck, have fun, and take care.